Okay, so learning is, like I said, modules 23 to 25, and we're going to start with what learning actually means. What does it mean to learn? Ideas? Pat? No? Okay, so gaining knowledge. Okay, gaining knowledge, knowing how to apply to certain situations. Anything else? Okay, can be observational. So again, gaining knowledge. We're going to define learning as a relatively permanent change in an organism's behavior due to experience. So some sort of experience changed their behavior. Notice we said organism. So this could be humans, it could be animals. So, this is the definition from the book. I did want to share with you the definition that came with this handout. The definition that came with this handout would probably be easier, it's more specific to help you define, figure out which ones are learning, which ones are not. You do not need to write this part down, okay, but I am showing it to you from the standpoint of being able to help you figure out what's learning and what's not. So, psychologist Hilgard and Bowers is the one that had this list from handout 23-1 of examples of learning. Their definition of learning is that it's a relatively permanent change, again, we already said that, in a person's behavior given to a given situation brought about by his or her repeated experiences in that situation, provided that the behavior change cannot be explained on the basis of native response tendencies, maturation, or temporary states of the person or animal. Okay, so that's their explanation of learning. Now, go back through this list. If that's the explanation of what learning is, which ones actually are learning? All right. Any other comments about this? So now that we know what learning actually is, now we're going to look at how we learn. So now we're going to look at, first of all, classical conditioning. So classical conditioning is a type of learning where you link two or more stimuli. Okay, so classical conditioning is a type of learning where you link two or more stimuli. This is associated with Ivan Pavlov. I've briefly mentioned his name before. Anybody remember what he said? The dog. What did he train the dog to do? Salivate. He drew, right? Salivate when their bell rings. Okay, that's classical conditioning. There's a bunch of other guys in here that has to do with classical conditioning. We'll talk about them, but he is the main guy with classical conditioning. Okay, so Pavlov and his dog. The way the experiment basically ran was that Pavlov started with just presenting the dog. Okay, he had this dog that was hooked up to the machine that actually collected the dog's saliva, okay, to measure how much he would salivate when he presented him with food. Okay, so it was just giving him food, seeing how much he salivates, kind of getting a baseline, basically. And then he started going and in some places, some texts they talk about he rang a bell, sometimes it was a tone. He made a noise, okay? He made a noise. He had this bell that he would ring every time he'd give the dog food. Ring the bell, give the dog food. Ring the bell, give the dog food. Eventually got to the point he'd ring the bell, didn't give the dog food, and what did the dog do? Salivate, okay? So, from this, Pavlov basically has four things, okay? First of all, the unconditioned response is the natural occurring response to a stimulus, okay? Anytime you talk about classical conditioning, you talk about unconditioned response. These are things that are naturally happening. So in Pavlov's experiment, okay, naturally what does dog do? What's his natural response to food? Salivate. Okay? So the natural occurring response is the salivation. That's the unconditioned response, or the UR. Now, you can also talk about the unconditioned stimuli. The unconditioned stimuli, the unconditioned stimulus is going to be what causes the response. Okay, so what caused the salivation in the first place? Food. Okay, so the US, the stimulus that naturally causes this salivation is the actual food. Now, because of Pavlov's experiment, okay, he was actually able to train or teach the dog to salivate at the sound of the tone. So when he actually does that, then we're changing things around. And so now we have what we call a conditioned response. So this is a learned response to a stimulus that was originally neutral. Okay? So the conditioned response is the dog salivating still. Okay? So the conditioned response, the dog now learns to salivate. However, now the dog's salivating because of why? Because the bell rang. Okay? So we can talk about the bell being the conditioned stimulus. So the conditioned stimulus, or this ES, is a stimulus that was originally neutral but now causes a conditioned response. Now, this is, when this actually happens, it happens over time. It depends upon what you want the organism, the dog, or the people to actually do, how long it takes for the conditioned stimulus to cause the conditioned response. Sometimes it's a very short period of time, sometimes this is a very long period of time. It just kind of depends. Okay? Obviously, in Pavlov's example, he had this dog that was, he was training to basically salivate at the sound of a bell, and that's what we call acquisition, when he was first going through this process, when he's first learning the conditioned stimulus. Okay? Oh, I have an example for you. I forgot about this. Anybody ever watched The Office? Okay, come on.
Damn, that was not file. I have to reboot again. Okay, what do you want, Alvin? What do you think? In school, we learned about this scientist who trained dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell, like eating them whenever a bell rang. For the past couple weeks, I've been conducting a similar experiment. What? I don't know. Okay. How about anyway? Reboot. What are you doing? Well, I don't know. I'll take some valves.
Okay, so obviously in that example, what would be our conditioned stimulus? The computer making the noise, right? Conditioned stimulus is the computer making the noise. What's the conditioned response? He's holding his hand out, right? That was obviously the unconditioned response, the unconditioned stimulus. That wasn't seen in there, but if we, just talk about him asking, for example, him asking, "Do you want an Altoid?" Okay, there would be an unconditioned stimulus. Him holding out his hand is an unconditioned response. But then he got it so that it wasn't even, he didn't even ask him. It was just the noise of the computer, and he automatically held out his hand. Okay? All right. Pavlov continued. A couple other things that I want to talk about. First of all, extinction. Sometimes what will happen is that you can stop providing that stimulus, basically. if you stop providing the conditioned stimulus, okay, then the conditioned response declines in frequency. So what Pavlov found was that if he stopped going and ringing the bell, okay, the dog would stop salivating. So if he would, randomly go and ring the bell and not provide food, okay, the dog would stop salivating. It's what we call extinction. Now, this is the idea that the stimulus was not reinforced, so he didn't provide the food. Now, this does not mean that the response has completely gone away, because we can also see what we call spontaneous recovery. And spontaneous recovery occurs when the conditioned response returns after extinction. So Pavlov would stop ringing that bell, or stop providing the food after he rang the bell, and the dog would stop salivating. And then the next time he goes and rings the bell and provides the food, he'd start salivating again.
But would it be faster or the same speed?
It would be a lower frequency. It would be a less of a response.
Oh, so you wouldn't have to continue to give them the food to get it spontaneous.
Yeah, it would. You'd have a spontaneous recovery. It would happen when you would have you'd start presenting the food again, and the dog would start salivating, but it wouldn't be as much as before the extinction. Okay, you can also have what we call generalization. This is going to be a response to a stimulus that is similar to the conditioned stimulus. So like I said, some people say that Pavlov rang a bell, some people said that it was a tone, it was a noise, right? Generalization is that if you get the dog to be able to recognize any sort of tone, a buzzer, okay, and they salivate, even though it's not exactly what they were conditioned to, it was something similar, they will respond similarly. So again, the dog was out. All right, and then discrimination is when you can distinguish between conditioned stimulus and other stimulus. So this is going to be when the dog actually recognizes there's a difference between a bell and a buzzer. The bell will produce food, the buzzer will not. Now this also works for people, okay? What you will find is that you will have generalization. For example, if somebody was, as a small child, bit by a pit bull dog, okay? They will maybe start to fear all dogs because they're generalizing. All dogs are bad. They're all going to bite me, okay? Discrimination is when the child actually learns the difference between a pit bull and a German Shepherd, okay? So discrimination can also affect fears as well. Now, when this actually looks like, what this actually looks like when you graph it, what they will do is that they will look at the acquisition. Remember, is when you are learning the conditioned stimulus. So this is the y-axis is going to be the strength of the conditioned response, and then the x-axis is the time. So what happens is that over time, we will gain the strength of the conditioned response will increase, and then during extinction, the response will decline, and then you have this pause, and then you have this spontaneous recovery where you will notice that the response is going to be about medium high, but it's not as high as it was before the extinction. Does that make sense?